Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels almost like engineering, right? You fall off your bike, you feel a sharp pain in your wrist, and you go straight to the emergency room.
Yeah, you want to see exactly what's wrong.
Exactly. So the technician positions your arm, the machine whirs, and the x-ray pops up on a screen. And there it is, just a jagged, glowing white line right across the bone.
Right.
And the doctor just points a pen at the screen and says, well, there's the fracture.
Because it's binary. I mean, it's either broken or it's not.
Yeah.
The relief in that moment, even though you're, obviously in a lot of pain, it comes from the absolute certainty of the visual evidence.
Totally.
We just inherently crave things to be visible. We want them to be neatly categorized and labeled.
But then you step into the world of our inner psychology or, our neurodevelopment or how we process daily emotional friction.
And the x-ray machine is useless.
Completely useless. Suddenly we're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely invisible. I mean, it's incredibly murky.
It really is.
You can't put a troubled inner voice under a scanner.
Yeah.
You can't point to the jagged white line where your self-esteem fractured.
No, you really can't. It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah.
And that exact transition, moving from the clean, visible external stuff to the murky, invisible internal stuff, that is the foundational hurdle for what we're tackling today.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how we typically try to manage our lives, we usually start with that x-ray approach.
Which is exactly what we did in our previous deep dive.
We did, yeah.
We spent hours focused purely on the external world. We talked about external time management, optimizing your calendar, simplifying the logistical supply chains of your daily life.
Automating your finances, all of that.
Exactly. It was all very concrete. There was this idea that if your calendar was color-coded and your desk was perfectly clear, you were supposedly fixed.
Because external frameworks are incredibly seductive.
They really are.
They offer this immediate, visible proof of effort. You can look at a clean inbox and feel a massive sense of accomplishment.
Oh, the inbox zero high.
Right. But there is a massive and often really painful catch to that approach if you just stop there.
Right, because managing your calendar perfectly, mapping out every 15-minute increment of your workday, it's utterly meaningless if your mind is a chaotic, hostile place to live.
Exactly.
You could sit down at a perfectly minimalist, organized desk, light a really expensive soy candle, and if your internal landscape is an absolute battlefield, you aren't going to experience a single second of peace.
None at all. The friction just moves. It just moves from your physical environment directly into your mental environment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the realization that true productivity, true peace, and true capabilities start from within, and not from like a leather-bound planner or some new app, it completely flips the script on how we try to improve our lives.
It really changes everything.
So our mission for this deep dive is to conquer that internal landscape. We have this stack of really fascinating sources today.
We do. A great collection of transcripts, personal development discussions, communication coaching notes.
Right. All focused on the daily life psychology and social skills. So we're going to map out how to master the inner voice, how to build an absolutely unbreakable foundation of self-worth.
And setting boundaries.
Yes, erecting firm, unapologetic boundaries.
Mm.
And then, crucially, how to translate all of that internal security into confident external communication with the rest of the world.
It is entirely a journey from the inside out. We are shifting from high-level psychological theory regarding how we value ourselves down to the very grounded, everyday mechanics of social skills.
Right. The stuff we actually do every day.
Because how you talk to yourself ultimately dictates how you speak to a stranger in line at the grocery store.
That is so true. And as we navigate this, if you are listening to this right now, maybe you're driving, maybe you're folding laundry, or just staring at the ceiling.
Which is totally fine, by the way.
Yeah. But I invite you to really hold a mirror up to your own internal dialogues. Pay attention to those quiet conversations you have with yourself when a meeting goes wrong.
Or when you accidentally drop a glass in the kitchen.
Oh man, the kitchen mistakes.
Right.
That knee-jerk reaction in your head. That's where the real mechanics of your life are operating.
But before we can even begin to tinker with that inner voice, though, we have to understand the metric it is currently using to judge you.
The yardstick.
Exactly. We have to look at the yardstick. Because almost all of us, basically by default, build our internal world around these massive, glowing external
Oh,
scoreboards.
the scoreboard. We are universally obsessed with it.
We really are.
And modern society makes it so incredibly easy, I mean almost mandatory,
Yeah.
to be obsessed. We love easy measurements.
Right, things we can count.
Exactly.
Hmm?
We look at our annual salary, the square footage of our house, the number of followers or likes on a screen.
Job titles, too.
Right. Our job titles, our age relative to our peers' accomplishments. Human beings flock to scoreboards because they give us this illusion of certainty in a world that is inherently totally uncertain.
What's fascinating here is the psychological trap that creates over time.
Okay, tell me more about the trap.
Well, society fundamentally equates visible wealth and countable metrics with inherent competence and personal value.
Yeah.
We have this collective, unspoken agreement that a higher number automatically equals a better, more worthy person.
Which is so messed up when you say it out loud.
It is, but because money or social media metrics are visible, they're easily countable and highly comparable, they become a very neat, highly efficient little scoreboard for human value.
Right.
But when you start tying your fundamental self-worth to a fluctuating number, the psychology of your daily life twists in a very, very dangerous direction.
Because it stops being about the logistics of surviving.
Exactly.
When you tie your self-worth to a number,
Yep.
say your bank account balance or your quarterly performance review, when that thing rises, you feel worthy.
You feel great.
You feel physically larger, you walk taller, but the moment it falls, you feel smaller. You feel defective.
It's a horrible feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
The question completely changes in your head. It twists from a practical, do I have enough to pay my bills, to a much more existential, painful question.
Am I enough?
Yes. Am I enough as a person?
Because you are essentially taking your self-worth, placing it in a little box, and handing it over to something completely outside of your control.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You are hanging your heart on a market fluctuation or another person's opinion. And the reason validation from these external scoreboards is so incredibly addictive is deeply rooted in our evolutionary biology.
Okay, the biology piece is interesting.
It's huge. When you get that validation, when the crowd applauds, when you get the promotion, when the numbers go up, your nervous system responds by temporarily calming down.
Huh. So it's a physical reaction.
Completely physical. It releases neurochemicals that basically say, lovely, the tribe accepts us. We are not going to be cast out into the wilderness to starve. We are safe.
Right, so it literally feels like survival.
It really does.
It's a dopamine hit masquerading as existential safety.
Precisely the issue. It masquerades as safety, but the half-life of that feeling is terribly short.
Because it fades so fast.
Right. It fails to provide long-term emotional stability because the moment the applause stops or the number drops or, someone else gets a bigger promotion, that biological panic returns.
Wow.
When you hand your self-worth to a societal scoreboard, you are giving the world a remote control for your feelings. You're giving them the remote control for your nervous system.
That is a terrifying thought.
It is. You don't teach yourself how to stand on your own feet emotionally. You just learn to constantly seek the next hit of external approval to stave off the panic.
But wait, I struggle with this concept just a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because we live in a highly competitive capitalist society, right? Isn't it just human nature to want a scoreboard?
Sure.
It tells us if we're winning or losing, if we're moving forward or backward. Think about playing a video game.
Okay, a video game.
Yeah, when we play, we are entirely focused on the points flashing on the screen, the level we've reached, the high score. It gives us a sense of direction and purpose.
Right.
Without the points, what is even the point of playing the game at all? If I don't care about the scoreboard, how do I stay motivated to, pay my mortgage?
It's a very fair question, and honestly, the video game analogy is actually perfect for explaining the nuance here.
It is.
Yeah, let's extend that analogy a bit. When you are deep into a video game, you do care about the points. You absolutely want to win the level.
Of course.
But if you fail the level, if your character falls into a pit or whatever, you don't suddenly believe that you, the human being sitting on the couch, are fundamentally worthless.
Right. I see where you're going.
We get so obsessed with the points on the screen of life that we forget we are the ones holding the controller. The points are just feedback on how the game is going. They are not a measure of the soul holding the controller. The trap we fall into is confusing the game's score with the player's inherent value.
Okay, yes. That makes so much sense. We completely forget we are holding the controller. we think we actually are the avatar on the screen.
Exactly.
There's this beautiful story in our sources that really grounds this idea.
The one about the woman and the herbs.
Yes. It's about this woman who earned very little money. She just worked odd jobs, but she possessed this incredibly magnetic, quiet joy.
It's a great example.
She spent her days growing herbs in these small terracotta pots on a tiny balcony. She meticulously made loose-leaf tea for her neighbors.
And she talked to the postman, right?
Yeah, she talked to the local postman every single day like he was her own family. Her life was incredibly simple, almost invisible by society's high-achieving standards.
Right, she wasn't climbing any corporate ladder.
Not at all. But she never once seemed to question her value. Her confidence and her presence felt vastly richer than, say, a CEO pulling down 7 figures who is constantly stressed out about shareholder returns.
That anecdote perfectly highlights a crucial distinction that our culture deliberately blurs.
Which is?
The immense difference between comfort and contentment.
Ah, yes.
Society aggressively markets the idea that increasing our score on the external scoreboard will eventually yield contentment, but really it just yields comfort.
Right. Comfort being things like a high-thread count sheet, a car that doesn't make a weird rattling noise when you turn the key,
Exactly.
or a roof that absolutely doesn't leak, or just buying a really good cup of coffee without having to look at your checking account balance first.
Money and success can absolutely buy comfort, and we really shouldn't pretend comfort doesn't matter. It matters immensely.
Changes your whole day.
It does. It reduces daily friction. It provides medical care. It makes life significantly easier and physically less stressful.
Right.
But contentment, that quiet, deep, unwavering feeling of, this is enough, and I am enough regardless of what happens today, that does not come from shopping carts, or big paychecks, or corner offices.
Yeah, you just can't buy it.
You cannot purchase the feeling of being fundamentally okay with yourself.
Which leads us to a massive pivot point.
Okay.
If the external scoreboard is a flawed metric for who we are, right? If comfort isn't the same as contentment, then what is the internal mechanism we are actually supposed to be building?
That is the big question.
To figure that out, we have to make a very sharp distinction between how we project ourselves to the world and how we actually value ourselves in the dark.
Yes.
We need to dissect confidence versus self-worth, the shiny versus the deep.
This is where the vast majority of personal development advice completely misses the mark.
Really? How so?
Well, people conflate the two concepts constantly. They think, if I can just learn to be more confident, if I can learn to speak louder, stand taller, and project authority, I will finally feel worthy.
Right, the whole fake it till you make it thing.
Exactly. But confidence and self-worth are answering two completely different psychological questions.
Okay, let's break those down.
Yeah.
Confidence is purely about your assessment of your abilities, right?
Oh.
It is entirely situational.
Yes.
Confidence asks the question, can I do this specific task? Can I ace this quarterly presentation? Can I strike up a conversation at this networking event?
Can I successfully parallel park this car on a busy street?
Exactly.
And because it is tied to abilities and execution, confidence is inherently shiny.
Shiny. I like that.
It shows up in what you do. It's highly visible to other people when you walk into a room, when you articulate a vision clearly, when you perform a complex task competently.
Right.
It is an external display of competence, and it can be faked, at least for a while.
But self-worth is an entirely different beast. Self-worth is how you feel about your value as a living, breathing person, completely independent of your abilities or your current success rate.
It is much deeper. Self-worth asks a much harder, much deeper question. It asks, if I do not do this well, if I completely bomb this presentation, if I get rejected at this party, am I still fundamentally okay inside? Self-worth is quieter. It doesn't need to announce itself. It operates beneath the surface.
Right.
And the tragedy here is that someone can look entirely confident on the surface. I mean, they are articulate, they dress impeccably, they run board meetings with absolute authority.
But inside.
They can simultaneously suffer from a terrifyingly fragile sense of self-worth. They might be operating not out of joy or ambition, but out of a sheer exhausting terror of being ordinary.
Oh man, that hits hard.
Or a deep-seated fear that if they ever stop performing flawlessly, they will just cease to matter to anyone.
There is this incredibly vivid description of this specific state of being from our sources.
Oh, the moisturizer quote?
Yes. It's described as trying to look emotionally moisturized while you are completely drying out inside.
It's a very visceral image, isn't it?
It is. It perfectly captures the exhaustion of maintaining the shiny exterior of confidence when the deep, subterranean well of self-worth is entirely empty.
You spend all your energy polishing the surface because you are terrified of anyone seeing the hollow core.
Yeah.
And what is vital to understand is that true self-worth doesn't just magically appear because you repeat a mantra in the mirror every morning.
Right, it takes actual work.
It is actively destroyed or meticulously built by the mundane habits of our daily lives.
Okay, let's look at the destruction phase first. What are the quiet, everyday habits that are slowly drying us out inside, draining that well of self-worth?
There are three major behavioral culprits that act like slow leaks in a tire.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first and arguably the most common is people-pleasing.
Oh, a huge one.
And we need to be clear here. This isn't just about being a nice person or being polite.
Right.
This is a compulsive behavior where you treat everyone else's emotional comfort as your full-time, unpaid job. It is smiling and saying yes when your body, your schedule, and your mind are desperately screaming no.
Because when you constantly prioritize others' needs over your own, you aren't just being helpful. You are sending a repetitive subconscious message to your own brain that your needs, and therefore you as an entity, come second.
I'd say.
You are literally teaching your nervous system that you are less important than the person standing right in front of you.
If we connect this to evolutionary psychology, people-pleasing was a survival mechanism. If the tribe didn't like you, you were cast out to die.
Right, we needed the tribe.
So we are hardwired to keep the peace. But in modern life, when you do it at the expense of your own boundaries, it heavily erodes your sense of self.
Okay, so that's the first leak. What's the second?
The second habit destroying self-worth is over-identifying with output and productivity.
Ah.
This is tying your worth directly back to that external scoreboard we talked about earlier.
Right. So if your internal monologue sounds like, I cleared my inbox and worked out for an hour today, therefore I earned the right to exist and relax this evening, you are on a treadmill that never, ever stops.
It never stops.
Because what happens on the days you get sick, or what happens on the days you fail, or you just desperately need to rest?
Your right to feel okay about yourself completely vanishes.
You basically become an employee of your own life, rather than the owner of it.
Perfectly said. And the third habit is tolerating disrespect.
This one is tough.
It is letting a sarcastic comment, a boundary violation, or just outright poor treatment slide because you are deeply afraid of the conflict that might arise if you push back.
Or even worse, because a dark part of you doesn't truly believe you deserve to be treated any better.
Exactly. All three of these habits, people-pleasing, productivity obsession, and tolerating disrespect, they all train you to look outside yourself for permission to feel okay.
Wow.
Your inner peace is never stable because it is entirely dependent on the fluctuating moods of other people and your own flawless robotic performance.
So how do we reverse the leak? If we want to build the deep stuff, that unshakable self-worth, what is the actual mechanism? Because we know it isn't just, standing in a superhero pose for 2 minutes in the bathroom.
No, definitely not. True self-worth is built deliberately, largely by doing the absolute opposite of those toxic habits.
Okay.
But the core mechanism is remarkably simple and deeply unglamorous. It is simply keeping small promises to yourself.
Small promises.
Yes, it is building a track record of self-trust. If you tell yourself you are going to go for a 10-minute walk at lunch, you go. If you tell yourself you are going to stop checking work emails at 8 p.m., you actually stop.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I love this analogy from the sources.
The boat one.
Yes. Think about navigating life like steering a boat across an ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence is the sails on the boat.
Right.
It's big, it's visible, it catches the wind, and it propels you forward. It looks incredibly impressive to everyone watching from the shore.
Very shiny.
But self-worth is the anchor. You can have massive, beautifully rigged sails, but without a heavy, solid anchor, the very first unpredictable storm that rolls in is going to completely capsize you.
Absolutely.
You'll be blown over by a single piece of harsh criticism or a failed project.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. You need the anchor to stay grounded when the wind of external validation isn't blowing your way.
Yeah.
Or when the wind of adversity is blowing much too hard. You drop the anchor to hold your position. And to build that deep, heavy iron anchor of self-worth, you have to look at the primary tool that is constructing it day in and day out.
Which brings us to the most chaotic part of the human experience.
Oh, yeah.
Managing the group chat in your head.
The inner voice.
The inner voice. Because if self-worth is the anchor, the inner voice is the blacksmith actively forging that anchor every single day. Or, in the case of most people, actively taking a sledgehammer and breaking it apart.
The human mind is rarely, if ever, a quiet, Zen-like sanctuary. It is much more accurately described as a ridiculously noisy group chat on your phone that is going off at 2 a.m.
Yes, there's absolutely no filter. It is totally chaotic, and everyone is basically yelling over each other.
All at once.
Inside this mental group chat, you don't just have one unified voice. You have an entire cast of characters fighting for the microphone.
Who do we have in there?
Well, you've got the bully, who is harshly judging your every move. You've got the coach, who is trying to encourage you and keep you focused.
Right.
You've probably got a perpetually worried grandma telling you to be careful and not take any risks, and a drama queen who specializes in escalating every minor inconvenience, like a late train, into a catastrophic ruin of your entire life.
And for the vast majority of people struggling to build self-worth, the bully is the loudest, most dominant voice in the chat.
By far.
The bully basically has admin privileges, and it operates with absolute ruthlessness. Think about lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, just trying to wind down and sleep.
Oh, I know this feeling.
What does the bully do? It cues up a high-definition highlight movie of every awkward mistake you made that day.
Or perhaps a cringeworthy thing you said a decade ago.
Exactly. It creates this intense, localized spiral of negative self-talk. Why did you say that in the meeting? They all think you're an idiot. You're always falling behind. Everyone else has this figured out except you.
It is utterly exhausting. You wake up tired because you've been defending yourself in a phantom court case all night long.
You really have.
But here is the major liberating takeaway when it comes to the neurobiology and psychology of this. The strategy is not to delete the negative thoughts.
No, you can't.
You cannot ban the bully from the group chat. Thought suppression does not work at all. It usually just makes the thought louder. The actual strategy is to turn the volume down on the bully and actively turn the volume up on the coach.
And there is a very real, hardwired neurological reason why we have to do this deliberately.
Tell us about the RAS.
Right. Deep inside the brainstem, there is a bundle of nerves called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
Okay.
This is essentially your brain's ultimate bouncer and filter. At any given moment, your senses are taking in millions of bits of information. Colors, sounds, temperatures, peripheral movements.
It's way too much data.
If your brain processed all of it consciously, it would overheat and shut down. So the RAS filters out 99.9% of it, only letting through what it deems important based on what you actually focus on.
This is the classic red car phenomenon.
Exactly. You never notice red cars. Then you buy a red car and suddenly you drive down the highway and you see red cars everywhere.
They were always there.
They were always there, but previously your RAS dumbed them irrelevant and filtered them out. The moment you bought one, your RAS tagged red car as important to your survival or identity, so it started filtering them into your conscious awareness.
So apply that neurological filter to the inner voice.
Right.
If the bully is constantly holding the microphone and you keep saying to yourself, I'm terrible at my job, I'm socially awkward, I'm a failure, you are actively programming your RAS to look for evidence of that belief.
You're telling the bouncer what to look for.
Exactly. Your brain will literally go out into your environment and find undeniable, cherry-picked proof that you are a failure. It will highly illuminate every slightly awkward glance from a coworker, every minor typo in an email, and it will completely filter out all the compliments, the successes, and the smooth interactions.
It blinds you to your own competence.
Yes, but if you consciously turn up the microphone,
The language you use internally literally dictates the physical reality you perceive externally. So the practical shift here is crucial. It's not about blind optimism.
no, definitely not.
Instead of saying, I'm hopelessly behind on this project, I'm an imposter, the coach steps in and reframes it objectively. I'm moving slower than I hoped on this project, but I am moving and I'm gathering information to speed up.
It's about changing the tone from condemnation to observation.
Yeah.
And there's this one incredibly powerful, grounding question you can ask when that drama queen or the bully is making your heart race and your palms sweat.
It's a great question.
You just pause the inner dialogue and ask yourself, is this a fact or is this fear?
Such a good distinction.
Is this a fact or is this fear? That is profound because facts act like flashlights. They illuminate exactly what is actually in front of you. A fact is, the deadline is on Friday and I have 3 pages left to write.
It's actionable.
Exactly. Fear, on the other hand, is like a thick fog. It distorts the shapes of everything, it makes small obstacles look like massive, terrifying monsters, and it completely blinds you to the actual path forward. Fear says, if I don't finish this, I'll be fired and homeless.
The irony is that the inner critic, the bully, often genuinely thinks it is protecting you.
Really? How?
It evolved as a defense mechanism. It thinks that if it beats you up internally before you step onto the stage, you will be hypervigilant, you won't make a mistake, and you won't get humiliated publicly.
So it's trying to keep you safe from the tribe.
It thinks it's saving you from the judgment of the tribe, but its methods are incredibly toxic and ultimately paralyzing.
I love this quick litmus test you can use for the bully from the source material.
Oh, the best friend test.
Yeah. Ask yourself, if your absolute best friend talked to you the way you talk to yourself in your own head, would you still be friends with them?
The answer is almost universally, unequivocally no. If a friend followed you around all day whispering, "You look terrible in those jeans, you sounded stupid in that meeting, you're never going to figure this out," you would cut them out of your life immediately.
Without hesitation.
We would never tolerate that level of sustained psychological abuse from an external source, yet we silently accept it from ourselves as absolute truth.
But I need to jump in here because I can hear someone listening right now saying, okay, but what if the bully is factually right?
Okay, let's explore that.
What if I actually did completely mess up? What if I gave a genuinely terrible presentation, forgot my notes, and embarrassed my team? Or what if I said something genuinely thoughtless to my partner and really hurt their feelings?
Real mistakes happen.
If I just turn to the coach and say, I'm learning, I'm glowing, everything is fine, isn't that just toxic positivity? Aren't I just delusionally ignoring reality to protect my feelings?
That is a phenomenal distinction to make.
Yeah.
Toxic positivity is dangerous because it denies reality. But the difference here is that the inner coach does not ignore the mistake. The coach does not say you were perfect when you absolutely weren't. The coach acknowledges the reality of the failure, but treats the mistake as data rather than an identity sentence.
Oh, treating it as data versus an identity sentence. That is the core of it right there.
Exactly. Let's look at the presentation scenario. The bully says, you stuttered, you forgot the slides, you messed up the presentation, therefore you are a fundamental failure and an imposter.
Right.
That is an identity sentence. It is a final verdict on your worth. The coach, however, steps in and says, okay, you messed up the presentation. That is a fact. That was painful and embarrassing.
It acknowledges the pain.
Yes. Let's look at why it happened. Did we stay up too late the night before? Did we not rehearse out loud? Okay, let's use this painful data to change our preparation protocol for the next one.
Wow.
The coach absolutely holds you accountable for the action, but it fiercely protects your underlying self-worth from taking the hit.
It turns a failure from a dead-end wall into a stepping stone. It's basically the scientific method applied to your own life.
It is.
And once you have that respectful inner coach dialed in, and you start building that grounded, heavy anchor of self-worth by keeping your promises to yourself, you inevitably reach a fascinating tipping point.
What's that?
You suddenly realize that your time, your physical energy, and your emotional bandwidth are incredibly valuable, finite resources.
Which naturally and unavoidably leads us to the necessity of building boundaries.
Dreaded boundaries.
Right. If you finally possess a strong sense of self-worth, you have to protect the energy that sustains it from the endless consuming demands of the outside world.
And this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Because the world is going to ask for your energy constantly.
Nonstop.
Your boss, your kids, your friends, your community.
Yeah.
And if we haven't built those boundaries, if we are still operating in the old software of people-pleasing, we fall right into the agonizing trap of the guilty yes.
Ah, the guilty yes. It is the hallmark symptom of the people-pleasing habit we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
It's the act of agreeing to do something not out of a genuine desire, joy, or actual capacity to help, but entirely out of a fear of disappointing someone.
Or avoiding conflict.
Exactly, or just desperately needing to be perceived as reliable.
There are these painfully relatable scenarios of the guilty yes in action from our notes.
Let's hear them.
Imagine it. It's Thursday night. You have already worked a grueling 50-hour week. You are completely depleted. But weeks ago, you promised your kids' school PTA that you'd help with the bake sale.
Oh, no.
So instead of sleeping, you are standing in your kitchen at 1:30 in the morning. There is powdered sugar in your hair, the sink is overflowing with batter-crusted bowls, your lower back is screaming in pain.
And you are furious.
You are baking 60 cupcakes while filled with this deep, simmering, toxic resentment toward everyone and everything.
We've all been there.
Or another classic, a friend calls on your only day off and asks for help moving apartments. You are physically and mentally exhausted, but you say yes anyway. So your physical body is there, carrying heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs, but your soul has basically left the building. You are harboring a grudge with every single step.
We laugh because we have all been there, but it is actually a profound, quiet betrayal of the self.
It really is.
Saying yes to someone else when your body, your mind, and your schedule desperately need you to say no is a literal form of self-abandonment.
Self-abandonment, that's a heavy phrase.
But accurate. You are vacating your own needs to house someone else's. Every single unnecessary yes you give to someone else's priority is a quiet, damaging no to your own peace, your own need for rest, and your own life's trajectory.
Yeah.
There is a brilliant, sobering concept to remember here. You don't have to set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm.
I felt that in my bones the first time I heard it. We are so conditioned to think that being a good person means providing warmth and comfort to everyone around us at our own expense.
Burning our own resources.
Right. Until there is nothing left of us but ash. But to stop doing that, we need to completely redefine what a boundary actually is, because a lot of people are terrified of boundaries.
They really are.
They think setting a boundary means building a giant hostile brick wall that shuts the entire world out and leaves them totally isolated.
They view a boundary as an act of aggression. They think it's an insult to the people around them.
But a boundary isn't a wall. The shift in perspective here is beautiful. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors.
Or filters.
Exactly. Or you can think of them as filters. You are the one in control of the door to your life. You get to decide who comes in, what kind of behavior is allowed inside your space, and exactly how long they get to stay.
Right.
You can still be an incredibly warm, generous, and hospitable person, but you are the one holding the handle to the door. You lock it when you need to sleep.
And implementing this door requires practical, specific language, especially if you have a lifelong habit of saying yes.
We need scripts.
We do. When you are put on the spot, your brain freezes, and you default to the guilty yes. You don't need to launch into a confrontational defensive speech. You need prepared scripts.
Like what?
Things like, I would absolutely love to help you with that project, but I am fully booked this week and wouldn't be able to give it the attention it deserves.
Okay, that's good for work. What about social stuff?
Even simpler for social obligations. I'm going to pass on dinner tonight. That doesn't work for me right now.
That doesn't work for me.
Huh.
It is so clean. It's revolutionary in its simplicity. Notice what is missing from that sentence.
The excuses.
Exactly. There is no over-explaining. There is no frantic lying, making up a fake excuse about your car breaking down or feeling sick.
Yeah.
You don't have to submit a 500-word essay defending your right to rest.
You really don't.
It is just a clear, polite, respectful door closing. But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Saying the word no is only half the battle. The real boss fight, the moment where most people crack, is what happens in the 24 hours after you say no.
Ah, yes. The dreaded post-no guilt. It's the worst. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the internal mechanics we discussed earlier really get tested.
Right.
When you finally summon the courage to start setting boundaries and putting doors on your house, the people in your life who historically benefited from your lack of boundaries are going to get very uncomfortable.
Oh, they hate it.
They were used to having an all-access 204/7 VIP pass to your energy.
Right. They absolutely loved the house with no doors. They could walk in, take your time, and leave whenever they wanted.
Precisely. Because you never required them to respect your limits. So when you install that door, they might push back. They might guilt trip you, act offended, or withdraw.
Yeah.
Or even if they are perfectly understanding, your own brain might generate an immense, crushing wave of internal guilt because you feel like you are breaking a fundamental, unspoken rule of your identity as the helpful one.
That internal guilt is so heavy.
But this is where you have to hold the line with a crucial piece of psychological reassurance.
Which is,
Just because you feel guilty does not mean you are guilty.
I genuinely need that tattooed on my arm. Just because you feel guilty doesn't mean you are guilty.
It is vital to internalize that distinction. That sickening feeling of guilt in your stomach isn't a moral signal that you've done something objectively wrong or harmed someone.
No.
No, it is often just an emotional echo of your old people-pleasing habits.
An emotional echo.
It's the ghost of your past conditioning flaring up, protesting the new neural pathways you are building. It's withdrawal from the validation you used to get by saying yes.
Wow.
You have to sit with that discomfort, let the echo fade out, and resist the urge to text them 5 minutes later, changing your no to a yes.
But I'll admit, saying no just feels so incredibly rude sometimes.
I know.
Feels like I'm closing up shop, being unapproachable, and letting people down. But there is an analogy that perfectly cures this feeling.
The house analogy.
Yeah. Think of a day without boundaries, like a physical house with no front door. Imagine living in a house on a busy street with no door in the frame.
Anyone can just walk in.
People just walk in whenever they feel like it. They track mud on your rugs, they open your fridge and eat your snacks, they sit on your couch and complain about their day, and they don't even take off their shoes.
It's a nightmare.
Setting a boundary is literally just putting a door on your own house. It's not an insult to the guests on the street. It's a basic, fundamental requirement for having a functioning, safe home. You can still invite people in, but on your terms.
And what's truly remarkable is the paradoxical effect of having those firm boundaries.
What happens?
Once you have those doors securely in place and you trust yourself to protect your own energy when you need to, your relationship with the outside world completely transforms.
Yeah.
Interacting with other people stops feeling like a constant threat of being drained or taken advantage of.
Which acts as the perfect bridge to our final frontier. Because if you have built that heavy anchor of self-worth, if you have trained a supportive inner coach to handle your mistakes, and if you have put a solid door on your house to protect your energy,
You can finally step out.
yes, you can finally step out into the social world, even with total strangers, from a place of genuine curiosity, rather than a place of defensive fear.
It changes the entire physical and mental dynamic of communication. Let's look at the classic everyday stressor that plagues almost everyone, small talk.
Ugh, small talk.
For so many people, small talk isn't just a casual chat. It feels like a high-stakes public performance.
Oh,
It feels like, as it's so aptly put in the text, taking a tiny personality test while wearing normal clothes.
yes. You are at a networking event or a neighborhood barbecue, and someone asks, "So how was your weekend?"
And panic sets in.
And suddenly, behind your eyes, your brain is running complex algorithms trying to calculate the perfect response. How do I answer this to seem interesting but not braggy? Do I sound fun or do I sound responsible? Should I mention I watched 12 hours of television or do I lie and say I went hiking?
It is absolutely exhausting.
It really is.
And the reason it is exhausting is because the focus is entirely internal and ego-driven. You are entirely focused on managing their perception of your scoreboard.
Oh, back to the scoreboard.
Always back to the scoreboard. The key to confident communication is a complete paradigm shift regarding the purpose of the interaction. The goal of small talk is never to sound brilliant.
It's not.
No. The goal is not to prove your worth or showcase your resume. The true goal of small talk is simply to put the other person at ease in a shared space. You want to make the moment lighter, not smarter.
Make the moment lighter, not smarter. I love that so much. It instantly takes all the pressure off your shoulders.
Exactly.
You don't need to have a killer stand-up comedy anecdote chambered and ready to go. You just need to be a pleasant presence. So if we remove the pressure to be brilliant, how do we actually start these lighter conversations without freezing up and staring at our phones?
The most effective approach is beautifully grounded in reality. You use what is already there in front of you.
Okay, give me an example.
You share the exact same physical reality as the other person in that specific moment. You comment on the weather, the ridiculously long line you were both trapped in at the coffee shop, the absurdly loud music playing in the store.
Or perhaps the most universally effective icebreaker, the dog with better hair than all of us walking down the street.
That is the best one.
You point to a shared, low-stakes observation just to break the ice and acknowledge their existence.
Right.
Okay, so you've pointed at the dog, you said it has great hair, the other person smiled and agreed, the ice is broken. Now what? Because the true nightmare for most people isn't saying hello, it's the suffocating, awkward silence that threatens to follow 10 seconds later.
This is where the structural mechanics of good conversation come into play. Specifically, the power of active listening and follow-up questions.
Okay, how does that work?
It's a 3-step rhythm. Step 1, actually listen to their response rather than planning what you were going to say next.
Lighter than it sounds.
Step 2, notice a specific detail in what they just said. Step 3, zoom in on that detail with a question.
Let's role play this to give a concrete example. Let's say we were at a party. I ask how your summer has been, and you say, "Oh, it's pretty good. I just got back from a trip to Spain."
Now, a poor conversationalist, driven by their ego or anxiety, will do one of two things.
What are they?
They will either say, oh, cool, and let the conversation die on the operating table, or they will immediately make it about themselves to prove they're interesting.
Right, like, oh, I went to Spain 5 years ago. Let me tell you all about my trip.
Exactly. The confident conversationalist, however, uses the zoom-in technique. They ask a follow-up. Oh, Spain is incredible. Which part did you visit?
Okay, and then the person says, mostly Barcelona.
You zoom in, again, peeling the onion. What made Barcelona special for you? Was it the architecture, the food, the pace of life?
You basically become a documentary director.
You really do?
You are just gently prompting them to keep rolling the film on their own story. People love to talk about what they care about. They just need permission and a willing audience.
And the critical mechanical rule here is avoiding closed-ended questions.
Right.
If you ask, did you like Spain? They say yes, and the conversation falls flat on the floor again. You have to start all over.
Open-ended questions are the engine of connection. Starting your questions with what, how, or why gives the other person a wide, expansive space to breathe, think, and expand on their thoughts.
Exactly.
But what if, despite all this structural knowledge, you still mess up?
We all do.
What if you stumble over your words, or forget their name 3 seconds after they say it, or literally spill your coffee on your shirt while trying to be charming?
This is where one of my favorite psychological phenomena comes to the rescue, the pratfall effect.
The pratfall effect, what is that?
Research shows that if you are generally perceived as competent, making a minor harmless mistake, like spilling a bit of coffee or tripping slightly, actually makes you significantly more relatable and likable to the people around you.
Wait, really? Our mistakes make us more likable?
Absolutely, because perfection is inherently intimidating. It makes other people feel insecure.
Oh, that makes sense.
When you share a small vulnerability or laugh off a slight clumsiness, it signals to the other person's nervous system that you are human, you are fallible, and therefore you are safe. It instantly puts them at ease. Slight clumsiness, handled with grace, is deeply endearing.
It's good to know my chronic clumsiness is actually a highly strategic social asset. I'm just putting people at ease.
You are.
But okay, eventually, no matter how good the conversation is, it has to end. And we have all been trapped in a chat in a grocery store parking lot for 20 agonizing minutes, the ice cream melting in the trunk, purely because neither person knows how to legally exit the conversation without feeling rude.
Graceful exits are a crucial yet rarely taught social skill.
We desperately need them.
You don't want to just fade out, check your watch aggressively, or physically start backing away into the bushes like a cartoon character.
Yeah.
There is a very simple, highly effective formula for this. Positive affirmation, plus a genuine reason to leave, plus a future bridge.
Ooh, I like a formula. So what does that actually sound like in practice?
It sounds like this. It was so lovely talking to you about your trip to Barcelona, but I really need to get going so I don't miss my train.
Yep.
Make sure you send me that link to the tapas place you mentioned.
It's so clean, it's respectful, it leaves a positive, warm final impression, and it provides a clear endpoint.
Exactly.
Now, to execute all of these things, the boundaries, the small talk, the exits, with actual confidence, it requires a concept that really brings all of our physical and mental tools together, the idea of alignment.
Alignment is key.
Because confident communication isn't just reciting a script of perfect words like a robot.
No, the words are only a fraction of the message. True alignment means your internal thoughts, your physical body language, and your vocal tone are all acting on the exact same team.
Right.
They are congruent. Let's look at what happens when they aren't aligned. When people lack internal confidence, they often subconsciously sabotage and weaken their own sentences before they even finish speaking them.
How so?
They might start a thought strongly, but by the end of the sentence, their vocal volume drops, they break eye contact, and they trail off with this sort of auditory shrug, ending on words like, so, yeah, never mind. Anyway.
It's like they're apologizing for taking up the oxygen in the room to speak.
Exactly. They don't believe their own words, so why should the listener? A confident voice, on the other hand, even if it is speaking very quietly, carries the thought all the way through to the absolute end of the sentence.
It places a period at the end.
It physically stands behind the words being spoken.
So if we look at the grand scope of everything we've discussed today, from the X-ray analogy to the internal group chat to the vocal alignment, how do I actually stop overthinking every single word before I speak? Because understanding the psychological structure is one thing, but feeling that alignment in my body in real time under pressure is another challenge entirely.
It requires shifting your fundamental perspective on what a conversation and really any social interaction actually is. You have to stop treating every interaction as a final exam on your worth.
I love the specific concept offered to reframe this in our materials.
Playing catch.
Yes. Stop viewing conversations as high-stakes performances and start viewing them purely as practice. Think about it like playing a casual game of catch in the backyard with a friend.
It's a great metaphor.
You don't need to wind up and throw a perfect major league 90-mile-per-hour fastball every single time you speak. That's exhausting for you, and it's terrifying for the person trying to catch it.
Absolutely.
You just need to toss the ball gently enough that the other person can catch it, and then they toss it back.
Yeah.
The only goal of the game is to keep the ball moving back and forth in the air. And if you drop the ball, if there's an awkward silence or you stumble on a word, it isn't a moral failure. You just pick the ball up from the grass and toss it again. It's just part of the game.
That mental shift is incredibly liberating. When you treat life's interactions as practice rather than a performance, the stakes lower dramatically.
The pressure just drops.
Your nervous system finally calms down. Your inner coach tells your inner bully to take a seat, reminding you that it's perfectly okay to drop the ball sometimes. And in that relaxed state, your true, authentic personality is finally free to come through the alignment of your voice and body.
Which perfectly brings this entire massive journey full circle.
It really does.
Let's distill the map of the internal landscape we've just traversed in this deep dive. We started by realizing that true peace requires abandoning the external societal scoreboards that falsely tell us our human worth is tied to a fluctuating number or a job title.
We learned to differentiate between the shiny, often fragile external performance of confidence and the deep, heavy internal anchor of self-worth.
We recognized the slow leaks of people-pleasing, productivity obsession, and tolerating disrespect.
And we tackled the chaotic 2 a.m. group chat in our heads.
We really did. We learned the neurological mechanics of the reticular activating system and how to consciously turn down the bully's volume while empowering the inner coach to treat our inevitable mistakes as useful data rather than devastating identity sentences.
We learned how to build doors on our personal houses, setting firm boundaries and saying no to protect our finite energy.
Right.
And crucially, we learned to understand that the resulting wave of guilt is just an old emotional echo of past conditioning, not a moral failing.
And finally, with our energy protected, our self-worth anchored, and our inner voice acting as an ally, we learned how to step out into the world.
Yes.
We learned to use small talk not as a terrifying test of our brilliance, but as a gentle tool to make the world just a little bit lighter for someone else, playing a simple game of catch with our words.
It truly is a comprehensive, cyclical framework for internal mastery. Master the inside, and the outside naturally aligns.
And to you, listening right now, wherever you are, please remind yourself that you do not need perfect execution of any of this by tomorrow morning.
Not at all.
You don't have to suddenly be a boundary-setting, perfectly aligned master communicator overnight.
Yeah.
Progress is simply showing up and trying.
Yeah.
Whether you are attempting to set a small boundary for the very first time today or just trying to be 10% kinder to yourself in your own head when you drop the ball, your fundamental worth as a human being is entirely secure. Your worth is unequivocally not up for discussion.
It is an inherent, unchangeable baseline. It is not a variable to be earned on a scoreboard.
As we wrap up this journey into the inner landscape, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your day and interact with the world.
Oh, okay, let's hear it.
We spend so much of our lives, so much of our precious finite energy and anxiety worrying intensely about what other people think of us. We fear their judgment. We contort ourselves to avoid their criticism. But think deeply about what we just learned today regarding the human mind. If every single person you pass on the street, every person in your office, is equally obsessed with managing their own chaotic 2 a.m. internal group chat, how much of the judgment we fear from them is actually real?
Wow, and how much of that perceived judgment is just a ghost? An illusion created by our own internal bully, projecting our deepest insecurities onto the blank, distracted faces of strangers who are entirely consumed by their own inner monologue.
Exactly. The doctor in the ER might be able to point to a broken bone on an X-ray screen, but they can never point to a physical manifestation of someone else's judgment of you.
Because it's not there.
Because most of the time that judgment isn't even there. It's a phantom. What could you accomplish tomorrow? How lightly could you walk through the world if you finally treated that judgment like the total illusion it truly is?
A truly fascinating, life-changing question to explore.
Until next time, keep diving deep.